Are you deeply immersed in your exam preparation and need to memorize your study materials as best as you can? Then this video is for you. I will introduce you to the ultimate study method that will engrave the materials into your memory and let you recall everything effortlessly on exam day. This study method is grounded in two core principles, proven over decades of educational research to be essential for outstanding exam performance. By implementing the method from this video, you won't need to second guess whether you will perform well in the exam in the future. And now, without further ado, welcome to Shribe. For many decades, research has been conducted that focuses on individual study success as the dependent variable and the understanding of how our brain retains information. From this research, we could derive recommendations for your exam preparation, right? Absolutely. The first thing you need to know is the two-stage memory system, the most widely recognized memory model in the literature. It is also known to many as the distinction between short-term memory and long-term memory. The reason we quickly forget things is due to so-called catastrophic interferences, which are essentially new pieces of information that overwrite old ones. Only through repeated and active recall can the information be transferred to the second system, commonly referred as long-term memory. The German researcher Hermann Ebbinghaus made a significant mark in psychology with a series of self-experiments. He was the pioneer in describing the so-called forgetting curve. The curve describes that we forget the majority of information shortly after studying it. However, by incorporating regular repetitions, the curve becomes less steep. Consequently, the intervals between repetitions can gradually increase over time. For instance, if you're studying an important slide deck for an exam, it makes sense to schedule a revision the very next day. Then, the next repetition could be after 2 days, followed by 4 days, and so on. What Ebbinghaus did not know back then, the steepness of the curve depends on the type of content. Written principles or laws are retained for longer than, for example, numbers and dates, or, as in Ebbinghaus's experiments, unrelated syllables. The more abstract and numerical your study material, the more repetitions you'll initially need. Building upon Ebbinghaus's discoveries, the concepts of active recall and spaced repetition emerged later as the ultimate study techniques. Core Principle 1. Active recall for exam preparation. In contrast to active recall, passive intake refers to the mere passive consumption of information, such as quietly reading a script or a textbook and making annotations. While this method may feel relatively effortless and relaxing at the outset, it's not the most efficient way to retain the contents. This is because very little actually sticks in your memory. The more effective method is to actively retrieve the materials. Here's how it works. Pose a question to yourself, similar to one you might encounter in your exam, and attempt to answer it aloud, relying solely on your memory. Flashcards are an ideal tool for this technique. Write the question on the front and the answer on the back. So, when working with a script or book or slide deck, your main goal should be to quickly transfer the contents, all the contents that you need to learn, into this question and answer format on your flashcards. If you can't fully answer a question, revisit the provided solution. To devise a study schedule that factors in the forgetting curve, let's delve into the second core principle, which is called spaced repetition. Essentially, I've already touched upon the principle. It's about scheduling repetitions just before you're about to forget the contents. Given that the forgetting curve becomes flatter over time, the intervals between repetitions can be extended. This approach often contrasts with typical study habits. Many of us briefly review content once, then driven by pre-exam panic, attempt to cram as many repetitions as possible in a short period. Ideally, the process should be the reverse. You should study at shorter intervals at the beginning of your preparation and only need a single review right before the exam. Especially when facing multiple exams in a brief period, plan your reviews such that the intervals between them are synchronized across the various exams. This approach maximizes the benefits of the spaced repetition principle. Using both active recall and spaced repetition in your exam prep is undoubtedly powerful. However, research on this subject has introduced another method on top of them that significantly boosts study outcomes. Here's what the science says. In their study, Lindsey and colleagues examined 3 study methods. The first method is something we are all too familiar with from school and uni. Each week, a topic or chapter was covered in the lecture, which was then assessed via a quiz. The second method was based on the spaced repetition principle. All participants in the study were presented with contents in their learning app, with increasing intervals between repetitions. These intervals were standardized for everyone. For the third method, participants were given a learning app that personalized the intervals with a simple algorithm. If a question was answered incorrectly, the next repetition came sooner than for the questions that were answered correctly. The app's algorithm thus adjusted the intervals and the number of repetitions individually for each participant during their exam preparation. The results were conclusive. Method 3, that is personalized spaced repetition, significantly outperformed the other 2. Even a month after the exam, the contents were best recalled by this group. Before we get to the best software tools you can use for this technique, please consider to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. The easiest way to implement algorithmic personalization for your exam preparation is through software. There are various flashcard apps available. When choosing one, make sure the app adjusts repetition intervals based on your personal answers. This typically happens through a feedback mechanism. You can indicate how well you were able to answer the question on a flashcard. If you rate your answer as poor, the app will present the card to you again sooner than others. This way, you compel your brain to perform at its optimal memory capacity. Examples of apps that implement this feature include Anki, Brainscape, Quizlet, Cram, and I Do Recall.